I guess when she was nominated for the court, but I mean, so she was put on the court in 1993. So I was 16. So I don't know how closely I was following that kind of news. And she definitely did not get the kind of like the kind of attention. Like, you know, I think people think of her as being an extremely liberal justice, and at the time, I think she was actually perceived as coming on as pretty moderate. So, you know, I remember hearing the name. I don't remember it being anything controversial. I don't remember there being like any strong feelings about it. And as far as I remember, she got put on without like too much fuss in the confirmation process. I mean, I feel like she and that court, you would have to take it as a whole. And, you know, she certainly took a very firm stance on women's rights. That's what a lot of the focus has been on in the recent months, and obviously since her death. You know, and they just tried to protect certain civil liberties and move the court forward in terms of that. You know, I think the ruling on same-sex marriage a couple of years ago is monumental, and you know, I personally agree with the idea of providing health care to those who need help with it. So I was very much in favor of their protections of the ACA. But, you know, I just think that's something that people need to appreciate overall too, when you look at her career, not just her time on the court, but her career is just how much things have changed. And I think one of the reasons she's gotten so much focus on what she's done for women is that was her primary focus when she was practicing law. So, you know, many of the cases that she argued, a lot of the legislation that she supported and worked to influence was centered around women's rights and women being able to protect their financial interests for starters. So, you know, being able to be the executor of an estate, like that's one of the big ones. You know, I read a story one time about how she was in a position where she had to hide her pregnancies from the law firm she worked for, because in those days you could be told, like, you know, look, it's too much aggravation to have a pregnant woman. You're going to have to take leave, so you don't have a job here anymore. And you know, it's not that long ago. This is like 50 years ago. So I would say that her refusal to accept any kind of limitations and she would not accept any arguments to say, well, this is why we would have to treat women differently. That was a pretty impactful contribution she made. You know, again, like I said, I think a lot of the financial rights that we now take for granted, again, that's not the stuff that necessarily makes history books, but it's certainly, that's certainly one of the most groundbreaking things that she accomplished. And, you know, part of it is because we can take it for granted. But, you know, like even, you know, my mom couldn't get a credit card until 1974 because you're supposed to just use your husband's credit card. So like that kind of thing, like, seems so absurd to us. And we've totally dismissed the idea that, that we could go back to something like that. And, you know, I don't think we would, but, you know, I would say protections for people who are, for women who are looking into starting a family, and, you know, that there's always there's this financial sacrifice no matter what you do. But I think more important than even like the financial stuff is just being able to work and pursue your career and your dreams and not have to feel like maybe there's a reason I shouldn't. And, you know, she was a really instrumental part in that. So protecting women's ability to continue working, to prevent employers from discriminating against them. You know, when I talked to, I remember a few years ago having a conversation with some women we work with who were like maybe 20, 25 years older than me. And they were almost like jealous because when they had their kids, it was just expected, you better leave work. And so by breaking down some of the legal impediments, she also broke down some of the social impediments, because the guilt trip started to get chipped away a little bit, because as a society, we were saying like, you know, okay, yeah, we need to accommodate, we need to help people out here. So I think that's what will be in the history books about her. And, you know, that's when I would caution, like, you know, as far as like what could change, I think, for example, if cases come before the court where employers want more flexibility and they don't want to have to accommodate pregnant women, I could actually see that being something that a future court could maybe look at it a little differently. And that's kind of what we have to be, all of us as a society have to be on our toes and aware of and push back against.
Thank you. That's like really interesting because like going back to like talking about your mom and how she couldn't get her first credit card until 1974, like that doesn't seem too long ago. And
No.
it's just crazy that I wouldn't even like
Right.
it wouldn't even cross my mind.
Right. And that wasn't like something she per se did, but she was one of the people who like pushed for, because I believe that was legislation. She was one of the people who pushed for legislation to bring that about. That wasn't a Supreme Court case, but other laws that were based on just like stereotypes that we have. Those were a lot of the cases she argued. So like one, and I'm blanking on the name of it. I would have to look it up. If you were in the military, if men in the military could share their healthcare benefits with their spouses, women in the military could not, because the assumption was, well, your husband's working. So those are like, that's based on a silly stereotype.
Mm-hmm.
So when people fought against it, she was one of the lawyers who argued against that and got rules like that overturned.
That's like it's just mind blowing how different times were from
Yeah.
then to now.
Yeah. So we have to be on guard.
Yeah.
Don't want to go back to that. I guess, one of the reasons that she made these arguments was that, your gender doesn't determine how capable you are. And she made the argument at one point, like, hey, look, we already decided race doesn't determine your capability. At least most of us have. Gender shouldn't either. And there were a few people who were like, because they were worried, like, well, if I hire a bunch of women and they all become pregnant, or, if women are going to cry at work or some nonsense like that. And, so I think that showing people that it's going to be okay. And in fact, it's actually better because you're going to get a better workforce. The more people you have to choose from, why would you want to cut your candidates in half? Like, why would you want to deny employment to somebody who could be a better, more qualified person because you're worried they're going to have a baby, or you're worried they're going to get married and their husband is going to tell them what to do. So, I think that's the life lesson there, is that like these things do make society better. Like, if you're an employer and you're trying to argue, I shouldn't have to, I should be able to let a woman leave work because she's pregnant, or I should be able to fire her because she's pregnant. Ultimately that's not really good for your company. And so I think she kind of forced us to realize that, and forced us to make our workforce better and make our candidates better.